There's a moment so subtle you almost never notice it, where someone decides how close they're going to let you get. It happens before a second date is planned, before a message is replied to with the same energy, before someone says they're just really busy right now. And the uncomfortable truth is this: most people don't pull away because they stop liking you. They pull away because of something you're doing without realizing it. If you've ever felt confused by how often connections fade for no clear reason, what I'm about to say may explain more than you expect. Here's the problem. You're not careless with people. You're thoughtful. You listen. You don't play games. And because of that, you assume your intentions are obvious, but attraction doesn't run on intention. It runs on emotional experience. People don't fall for how reasonable you are. They fall for how they feel around you. And when the feeling is calm but flat, respectful but distant, safe but emotionally quiet, something important goes missing. No one announces it. They simply feel less compelled to lean in. Now, let's make this uncomfortable for a second. Many people who push others away aren't afraid of intimacy. They're afraid of being misread, rejected, or seen too clearly, so they manage themselves. They choose the right responses instead of the real ones. They hold back enthusiasm so they don't look eager. They soften opinions so they don't rock the boat. On the surface, this looks mature. Underneath, it creates an emotional gap. The other person senses that something is being filtered, and without realizing why, they stop offering more of themselves too. Think about how this shows up in dating. Someone shares a story that matters to them, and you respond thoughtfully, but safely. No emotional risk, no personal reveal. Or they flirt lightly and you smile, but redirect the conversation to something neutral. You're not shutting them down. You're just not stepping forward either. Over time, the message lands anyway. This is as close as it gets. And when people feel that, they don't argue with it. They adapt or they leave. What makes this so frustrating is that it often comes from a good place. You learned somewhere along the way that being composed is attractive, that independence is desirable, that emotional restraint equals strength. And to a point, that's true. But attraction isn't built in restraint. It's built in resonance. It's the feeling that two people are emotionally present with each other in the same moment. Without that, chemistry struggles to breathe. Let me say something that may challenge you. If people frequently describe you as great on paper or say things like, "I just didn't feel it," that's not bad luck. It's feedback. Not feedback that something is wrong with you, but feedback that something is missing in how you show up emotionally. And ignoring that feedback doesn't protect you, it repeats the pattern. Here's the solution we're moving toward. The answer isn't to overshare, to perform emotion, or to become someone you're not. It's to allow your internal reactions to be seen in small, honest ways. A genuine smile instead of a polite one. A moment of excitement that you don't immediately tone down. A personal truth shared before you feel perfectly safe doing so. These moments signal warmth, openness, and invitation. And here's what most people don't realize yet. The very habit you believe keeps you emotionally safe may be the reason people never fully step toward you. Once you understand exactly how that habit shows up, changing it becomes far easier than you think. One of the most common ways this habit shows up is through emotional self-containment disguised as confidence. You've trained yourself to be steady, unbothered, self-sufficient. You don't chase, you don't overreact, you don't let things shake. And on the surface, that looks incredibly attractive. But here's where it quietly turns against you. People don't feel needed, invited, or emotionally relevant in your world. They feel optional, and no one falls in love where they feel optional. Here's the pain in this. You think you're giving someone freedom. You think you're being respectful. You think if they like me, they'll step forward. But attraction doesn't grow in emotional silence. It grows when someone feels like their presence actually matters. When your reactions are muted, when your desire is understated, when your interest is implied instead of expressed, the other person starts doing something dangerous without realizing it. They stop investing. Think about how this plays out on a date. They share something vulnerable. You nod, listen, maybe even give solid advice, but you don't let yourself be affected. You don't show how it lands on you. You don't reveal what it stirs inside. So instead of feeling closer, they feel oddly alone the moment. Not because you were unkind, but because you stayed emotionally untouched. Connection requires contact, and emotional contact means allowing yourself to be moved. This is where fear quietly enters the room. the fear of caring more than the other person, the fear of being seen as too much, the fear of giving someone power to hurt you so you keep your emotional volume just low enough to feel safe. The problem is attraction needs volume, not chaos, clarity, not intensity, presence. When that's missing, people don't think they're protecting themselves. They think, I don't feel chosen here. Here's a question that might make you pause. When was the last time you let someone see that they genuinely mattered to you before they had to prove it? Most people wait for certainty before they open. But certainty is created by openness, not the other way around. Someone has to go first. And when no one does, the connection quietly starves. What makes this pattern so tricky is that it's rewarded early on. Emotional restraint can feel mysterious. It can create intrigue. But mystery only works when it promises depth beneath the surface. When depth never arrives, intrigue turns into distance. People don't leave because they're bored of you. They leave because they don't feel emotionally met. Now, here's where the shift begins. The solution isn't to abandon your standards or lose your grounding. It's to let your internal world leak out just enough for someone to feel invited in. Saying, I enjoyed that instead of that was nice. Letting your face show disappointment instead of masking it with humor. Admitting interest before the other person pulls away. These are small moments, but they create emotional gravity. And once emotional gravity is present, something powerful happens. People stop drifting. They start leaning. Because now being close to you doesn't just feel safe, it feels meaningful. There's another subtle way this pattern shows up, and it's one most people never suspect because it sounds like emotional intelligence. You're hyper aware. You read the room, you sense shifts in energy, and instead of addressing them, you adjust yourself. You become more agreeable, more flexible, more easy to be with. On the surface, this feels generous. In reality, it slowly erases you from the connection. Here's why this matters. Attraction doesn't grow when someone feels comfortable around you. It grows when they feel something real happening between you. When you consistently shape yourself around the other person's moods, preferences, or pace, you remove friction, but you also remove polarity. You stop being experienced as a full presence and start being experienced as a background hum. Pleasant, supportive, forgettable. Think about how often you've done this without noticing. They take longer to reply, so you tell yourself not to care. They cancel plans, and you say, no worries, even though it disappointed you. They seem unsure, so you become even more accommodating, hoping it will make things easier. But what the other person feels isn't ease. It's a lack of emotional consequence. Nothing seems to matter enough to you to register. This is where the real danger lives. When people don't feel emotional impact, they don't feel importance. And when they don't feel important, they disengage. Not dramatically, quietly. They invest less. They initiate less. They assume you'll always be fine. And you might even pride yourself on that. Until one day you realize the connection never deepened because there was nothing to deepen into. Let's be honest for a moment. Part of you believes that if you ask for more, express disappointment, or state a preference, you risk pushing someone away. So you choose neutrality. But neutrality doesn't protect connection, it dissolves it. Emotional presence requires contrast. It requires moments where your wants, reactions, and boundaries are visible. Otherwise, there's nothing for the other person to respond to. Here's a thought that changes everything. People bond not when things are smooth, but when they feel seen and felt by someone who is also fully there. That means letting your reactions exist even when they're inconvenient. Saying, I was actually looking forward to that, instead of pretending it didn't matter. Saying, I like spending time with you, instead of assuming they already know. These moments don't create pressure, they create clarity. What's fascinating is that the moment you stop over-adjusting, something shifts in the dynamic. The other person becomes more attentive, more curious, sometimes even a little nervous, in a good way. Because now there's something at stake. Your presence has weight, your reactions have meaning, and meaning is what turns attraction into attachment. Many people think pushing others away looks like distance or coldness. More often, it looks like being endlessly accommodating, being so understanding that nothing ever costs the other person anything emotionally. When that happens, they don't feel challenged to show up more. They feel permitted to show up less. And once you see this, you start to understand why some connections never quite catch fire, because you kept removing the spark in the name of being easy to love. There's one final layer to this that quietly ties everything together, and it's the hardest one to face because it feels like self-respect. You've learned to leave first emotionally. Not physically, not obviously, but internally. The moment you sense uncertainty, mixed signals, or the slightest risk of disappointment, you pull back just enough to protect yourself. You tell yourself you're being realistic, grounded, not attached too quickly. But what you're really doing is preemptively disconnecting. This is where the cycle completes itself. You don't wait to see if someone will hurt you. You assume they might and you adjust accordingly. Your tone becomes more measured, your availability slightly reduced, your curiosity less alive. You stop leaning in before you ever fully did. And here's the painful irony. The very behavior meant to prevent rejection often creates it. Imagine what it feels like on the other side. Someone senses you were warm, engaged, present, and then something shifts. You're still polite, still responsive, still nice. But the emotional door that was opening now feels half closed. They don't know what changed, only that it did. And instead of chasing clarity, most people interpret that shift as a signal. They assume your interest cooled, so they cool theirs too. This is where fear quietly disguises itself as dignity. You think, I'm just matching their energy. But energy matching without communication isn't balance, it's withdrawal. Real confidence doesn't disappear at the first hint of uncertainty. It stays present long enough to see what's actually happening. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Emotional courage is more attractive than emotional control. Control feels composed, but courage feels alive. Courage says, I don't know how this will go, but I'm here in it. And when someone feels that from you, it gives them permission to show up fully too. Let's bring this into something practical. Instead of pulling back when you feel unsure, try naming what's real, simply and calmly. I've enjoyed getting to know you. I feel a bit confused about where this is going. I like you, and I'm curious to see where this could lead. These aren't heavy statements, they're honest ones. And honesty creates emotional safety far faster than detachment ever will. What's powerful is that this doesn't just change how others respond to you. It changes how you experience dating. You stop waiting for signs. You stop overanalyzing pauses. You stop trying to out-strategize uncertainty. You become someone who participates instead of protects. And participation is where connection actually happens. Most people think being hurt is the risk of vulnerability. The bigger risk is never being fully met because you never fully arrived. When you consistently stay halfway out, you attract people who stay halfway in, not because that's all you deserve, but because that's all you're offering. And once you realize that, everything reframes. You stop asking, why do people pull away from me? And start asking, where am I pulling back first? That single shift changes the entire dynamic of your relationships, often faster than you expect. Here's where everything comes together, because awareness without action keeps you stuck in the same loop, just more conscious of it. The real shift happens when you decide to show up differently in the moments that matter most. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but deliberately, because the opposite of pushing people away isn't chasing them. It's allowing yourself to be felt. The saluti begins with a simple but uncomfortable choice, letting your internal experience be visible before you have guarantees. That means expressing enjoyment while it's happening, not afterward. Letting curiosity show instead of hiding behind composure. Allowing warmth to come through even when there's a chance it won't be returned in equal measure. This isn't about lowering your standards, it's about raising your emotional availability. Think about how different dating feels when you stop trying to manage outcomes. When you say, I had a really good time with you, and let that land. When you respond with genuine enthusiasm instead of controlled politeness. When you let a pause in conversation exist without filling it with performance or protection. These moments create emotional texture, and texture is what makes someone feel close to you, not just comfortable around you. What's fascinating is that when you do this, you don't become more vulnerable to the wrong people. You become clearer. People who aren't capable of meeting you emotionally will feel it faster and step away sooner. That's not loss, that's efficiency. And people who are capable will respond with more presence, more effort, more depth. You stop wondering where you stand because you've made where you stand visible. There's also something deeply attractive about someone who is grounded enough to be open. It signals self-trust. It says, I can handle my emotions even if this doesn't go the way I hope. That energy is magnetic. It invites intimacy without demanding it. It creates a sense of momentum that no strategy ever could. And here's the quiet confidence shift that changes everything. You stop seeing emotional expression as something that gives others power over you. Instead, it becomes something that gives you agency. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You're choosing to participate. You're no low. Anger, withholding to stay safe. You're showing up because you trust yourself. This is how you stop pushing people away without forcing anyone to stay. You replace emotional self-protection with emotional self-respect. You let people experience you, not just observe you. And when they do, the right ones don't drift, they lean in. If you've recognized yourself in any of this, take that seriously, not as criticism, but as information. Because the smallest shift in how you show up can completely change the kind of connection you attract. And once you experience what it feels like to be fully met, seen, chosen, responded to, you'll never want to go back to staying just out of reach. Connection doesn't come from being flawless. It comes from being present. And presence is a choice you can make the very next time someone sits across from you, looks you in the eyes, and wonders, consciously or not, how close you're willing to let them get.